Afternoon. This is Scott Arias with Ace Consulting. Today we're going to talk about business analytics. When you say this, a lot of people don't really understand it. There's a lot of universities trying to get on the train of this whole concept of business analytics. And Ace, as an organization, is kind of on the forefront of providing analytics to companies. We come in and we train them on basically how they set up their company to provide analytics, and then we assist them in the implementation and the assessment, periodic assessment. So I kind of want to walk through that using an example on business analytics. This idea kind of came to me a while ago when I was reading the book Traction, and it talked about entrepreneur operating systems and the way that we have to set up individual metrics for EOS to work. Well, business analytics is key to that. It's setting up a dashboard view. So we'll kind of just walk through this real quick. Different view today. I'm trying to, show you a PowerPoint that we have put together, kind of introductory to business analytics. Okay, the first thing is that business analytics is just simply this. It's an analytical way of looking at a business using some common metrics, okay? Well, what are some common metrics for construction? That's the first thing that we want to talk about. So what we've done is we have used an analogy of a car and how a car runs and how the information relates to a construction company. Now, a business analyst can be used in any industry, in any business, but I'm going to talk specifically about construction, a project-based kind of business, but it can really be applied, and we've applied it to different organizations, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here today. This is really about a focus approach to running an organization. As an owner, I can say that it can be very chaotic to run an organization, and if you're not actively engaged in the important things, the things that you need to put a priority on, then it could lead you to failure. So we want to prevent that from happening, and we can prevent that from happening by having clear measurements of what we want to do. Okay, we'll start with the speedometer, okay? The speedometer represents the construction projects as a whole. It will determine how fast or how slow a company is running, in their operations, what they do every day. Not only it's the number of projects, but also the complexity of the work that takes place. So the speedometer on a dashboard of a vehicle tells you how fast you're going, and that applies to the same thing with the business analytics piece, is it gives you a dashboard view of how your projects are doing. It determines if you're going too fast or too slow, just like a speedometer would. If you're going too slow, you need to accelerate the projects, accelerate the process, put more resources on it, come up with some creative ways like, changing relationships, changing the means and methods, those type of things. But if you're going too fast, you can also outrun your resources, outrun the things that you need in order to successfully execute your work. So we want to be able to get a 10,000-foot look at the operations of our business, and that's what we want to do. Most people, once I point it out to them and we go through their schedules and go through their projects, they realize the analytical piece of this is not as complicated as you would think. There are two things that we want to look at. Duration and man days. And the reason we want to look at duration and man days is because duration represents getting people to show up to work, and that's one of the big problems in construction. And the second one is manpower or people power, however you want to say it. People power, how many people do they bring to work on an individual task? Because that directly affects the work that's taking place. As I said before, if you go too slow or too fast, that's an issue in itself. This is one of the big gauges to success, and most companies do not provide proper oversight on a project to be able to assess it. And more importantly, not only they don't provide appropriate oversight, they're not focusing on key aspects like how quickly a project's running or how they're doing according to the baseline, those type of items. The oil gauge, in this case, the oil gauge represents our accounting, right? In order for a company to make money, they want to make sure they're working efficiently and effectively. Provided from a financial perspective, we need to look at things like AR sheets, AP sheets, um, profit and loss statements, those type of things. And we want to make sure that we're paying our bills and we're billing correctly, and keeping billings on time. We're recording and collecting money as needed, and keep us in a positive cash flow position. The biggest issue with most companies, well, I'd have to say all companies, is cash flow, especially if you're a small business owner. So, one of the dashboard views would be the oil gauge. The oil gauge in this case represents accounting, and accounting will be able to tell us some key metrics like how are we doing on collections, what's our collections that are 30 days overdue, what does our aging report look like, those type of items. Next is the field gauge. Now, the field gauge represents our estimating department. We want to look at things like how strong our estimating department is, because if we don't have fuel, to give to the engine, obviously we're not going anywhere, right? So if there's no fuel, there's no need to look at the speedometer, because we're actually going nowhere. So that's what the estimating department's all about, and that's why estimating is the field gauge. It is the key factor that affects construction. I think we recognize how important estimating is, but we don't fully recognize the implications it has. So we want to figure out the best way we can position ourselves. We want to focus our efforts. We want to focus our time and put clear analytics in place. Things like pipeline reports. That especially most small businesses don't think about what work is coming out in the future. Look at that pipeline. There are many different systems out there that allow you to do that, but that's something that we need to look at. We need to look at some common metrics and make sure we can clearly say, if we have a 20% win ratio, what are we billing, where, how do we increase it, those items there, and we keep track of it. The next item is the temperature gauge. The temperature gauge is human resources. A lot of people in construction do not look at human resources. They don't consider human resources as a factor until they realize they don't have people, or they don't have people with the proper skill set. So I could go into great detail on this, but I just want to provide you an overview. It's not just having people, but making sure people are effectively working, right? And I use the word happy, but happy is not the correct word to use. They're productive in what they do. I always say a happy worker is a successful worker. So we want to, make sure that HR is not only bringing people in, but we're retaining people. And retention, as I talked about before, is a huge issue for organizations, especially in the economy and the work environment we have right now. The next aspect of that dashboard view, is the voltage gauge. And the voltage gauge is really the administrative employees that take part. A lot of people don't, pay attention to that because they don't think it's that important. But the fact is, in order for people to do their jobs, like project managers and superintendents and different people, they have to have proper administrative support. They get a proper administrative support, they can do their job more effectively, right? So as a voltage meter starts to get low, management is less likely to get administrative tasks. And you know what? It's how much is it worth your time to do? I always talk about delegation with my folks, and delegation is a key issue. We don't realize how much time we waste on tasks that we could delegate. And that's what the voltage gauge really is, just an assessment of our administrative support that we have. The RPM gauge, it represents our field operations, right? It's going to measure the power coming out of the engine. So, we're going to say, okay, we're providing it fuel through estimating, and we're through project management, we're going at a certain, speed, but how much power are we putting into it to attain that speed? Do we need 2 superintendents? Do we need 3? What skill set do we need? All those individual items. This is where dollars are produced, right? And I think most people in construction recognize that field is where the money's made. However, sometimes we can forget when we're sitting in the ivory tower of our office making decisions. So another aspect that we have to look at within our organization is our RPMs, or our field staff. And behind the wheel, of course, is our executive management team. These are the people that are going to be driving us one place or another. They're going to be the one, pointing us in one direction or the other. Most owners are really good at those daily tasks, the estimating, the project management. They've come up through the ranks. They are aware of those things. However, when they get to the level of vice president or director or president of their own organization, they lack the vision. The vision is simply, where are we going as an organization? Some people think that's a waste of time, but if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get your people to get there, right? Somebody said, that's the way we make money, by doing daily tasks, and that's true. But you're not going to have those daily tasks if you don't have clear direction. So that's what, being behind a wheel is important. We're going to look at, or behind the wheel, we're looking at all the gauges. We're looking at, estimating, human resources, project management. We're looking at the field, and then we're directing those resources in the proper direction. That's really what the executive team does within an organization. And we're going to have various metrics to be able to measure that. So how do you develop these analytics? What we do is we're gonna find definable, easily measurable, and accessible information, and we're gonna report on it in a clear and concise way. We're going to make sure we can implement it and do it systematically, and we want the culture to change where people use these metrics to be able to assess their success. Because that's what it's about. It's about assessment of their success. Most people don't want to fail. They want to succeed. So we're going to basically show them how. So that's pretty much it for the analytics. Business analytics is the wave of the future, not only for construction, but business altogether. It's where people are going. It's what successful companies do. It's what unsuccessful companies don't do. You have to have clear metrics and to have them in a dashboard view where the owner, the president, the vice president can have a look of what we're doing and how we're doing it is essential. And ACE as a company can walk into any organization, talk with the staff, assess where we're at, and then map a plan to get us to that future state where we're having clearly definable metrics on a dashboard view that we can look at almost any time and make an assessment if our organization is successful. So that's all I have for today. If you're interested in business analytics, hit me up, send me an email. My website is ace-consulting.net. Drop me an email, call me, and I'll be more than happy to discuss it with you and kind of how to move that ball forward. Even if you don't use us, understand that analytics is important. If you're not assessing things on a regular basis, you're throwing money out the window. Instead of driving the car down the road, looking at all the gauges, you're driving down the road at 100 miles an hour with the window rolled down, throwing hundreds out the window, because that's what you're doing. You're throwing money out the window if you're not using analytics. That's all I have for today. We'll see you in the very near future. We have some podcasts coming out. A podcast I have hitting the streets in the very, very near future. Actually, I believe it's going to be next week. It's going to be, the podcast that we put together is called ConX. ConX is for construction executive, and it kind of has a play on word there from a Connex box, which we see on jobs all the time. And I'm going to have industry leaders on there talking about construction and their organization. We're going to be starting with Mark Hill. He is a regional vice president for Messer Construction in Lexington, Kentucky. And then the next one we're going to have off there is Stephen Gray. Stephen Gray is the CEO of Gray Construction, a billion-dollar corporation. So we're going to have discussions with them, hour-long podcast to discuss their companies and their vision and what they see in the industry. It ought to be pretty good. Follow on that. We actually were developing a personal podcast, and it's called Fail to Succeed, and it discusses I'm going to have invite people on that have gone through difficulties in their life and have come out better on the other side of it. So that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed.